We all know that velociraptors in Jurassic World and Jurassic Park looked like this, but did they really look like this in real life? Well, it's time to find out. Hi, and welcome to Paleologic. Today we're talking about velociraptors and how they looked nothing like Jurassic Park, rather more like this, or maybe this or even this, and we have the fossils to prove it. So let's dive into it. So when most people think of a velociraptor, they imagine a sleek, deadly, feathery, four-legged predator that was about as tall as a human and maybe twice as long. This is likely because of the portrayal of the animal in the Jurassic Park franchise. But if that's what you were picturing, then hold on tight, because today I'm going to show you 3 pieces of evidence that prove that velociraptors actually look nothing like that at all. Instead, I'll show you what the fossil record tells us these dinosaurs really looked like and how they really lived. And along the way, I'll explain some basic evolutionary biology so you can understand why there are so many differences between what we see in the movies and what we know from the fossil record. The first thing that really blows my mind when comparing actual velociraptors to their Jurassic Park counterpart is the size difference. In the movie, velociraptors stand around 4 feet tall at the hip and are roughly twice as long as they are tall. But the fossil evidence paints a very different picture. Holotype specimen of Velociraptor mongoliensis, the species we have the most complete fossil for, is actually only about half the length of a human. It is estimated that this individual may have been a bit on the smaller side, but the length of the rest of the known specimens doesn't really deviate too much from the holotype, meaning that an adult velociraptor wouldn't have been any taller than your average 5'2" person and no longer than 6 feet. That's not quite the terrifyingly huge monster that we see in the movies, is it? Another big difference between the velociraptors we see in Jurassic Park and the ones we find in the fossil record is the presence of feathers. In the movie, the velociraptors are portrayed as scaly reptiles, just like iguanas or crocodiles. But more recent discoveries have shown that birds evolved from theropod dinosaurs like velociraptors, meaning that they would have had feathers just like their avian relatives today. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I've got proof. Enter our third piece of evidence, the fossil of a feathered velociraptor. Yeah, you heard me right, a velociraptor with feathers. But wait, it gets better, because this particular specimen is also one of the best preserved dinosaur fossils we have ever found. Not only does it preserve feathers, but skin, musculature, even downy soft tissue. That's right, actual skin. We know the specimen so well that scientists have used it to create a detailed 3D model that can be manipulated and studied in ways that real velociraptors could not previously be. And it turns out that this velociraptor also had feathers. In fact, its feathers were so well preserved that scientists could even determine the shape of the feathers and discern the patterns created by their arrangement on the dinosaur. It appears that this velociraptor had long sickled tail feathers that may have been used for display or balance, as well as flight feathers on its arms that were likely used for gliding between trees. In other words, velociraptors were basically feathered little airplanes. Not only were they feathered, but based on the arrangement of the feathers, they probably weren't very good at running either. You see, feathers are lightweight and need to be supported by air sacs or hollow bones to function properly. This means that velociraptors didn't have the bulky leg muscles needed for effective running. Instead, they probably spent most of their time leaping between trees, using their feathers for lift. So forget the image of a velociraptor as a ruthless predator that could outrun you in a matter of seconds. They were probably pretty good at jumping, but not so great at sprinting. The last major difference between the velociraptors of our childhood imaginations and the ones we learn about as paleontologists is their overall anatomy. In the movies, the velociraptors are bipeds, meaning they walk on 2 legs. But according to the fossil evidence, they were actually quadrupeds, meaning they walked on 4 legs. Take a look at the pelvis of a velociraptor compared to that of a Tyrannosaurus rex. You'll notice that the front limbs of the velociraptor are much longer than those of the T-Rex. This is a good indication that the velociraptor wasn't built for walking on 2 legs, but rather for center of gravity was too far forward for effective bipedal locomotion. Additionally, while studying the skin and muscle structure of the aforementioned exquisitely preserved velociraptor fossil, researchers discovered that the dinosaur had a sprawling limb posture. What this means is that instead of having their legs positioned directly under their body like we do, the velociraptor's legs would have extended out to the sides, similar to a crocodile or a lizard. This sprawling posture would have been more advantageous for walking on all fours and climbing trees, but would have been less useful for running on two legs. And lastly, remember the infamous scene in Jurassic Park where the velociraptor is able to open doors by turning knobs? Well, it turns out that velociraptors actually couldn't do this. When studying the forelimbs of the same exquisitely preserved velociraptor fossil, researchers realized that the animal's hands had two fingers with claws at the end of them, kind of like little velociraptor mittens. Take a look at the hand of a human. Do you notice anything similar? Yeah, we also have 5 fingers with claws, but we use ours for typing and texting. They aren't exactly the same, are they? Because of this, we can safely say that velociraptors probably couldn't open doors by turning knobs. They simply did not have the dexterity or the physical capabilities to do so. So there you have it. It's 3 pieces of evidence from the fossil record that prove that velociraptors looked nothing like Jurassic Park. Instead of being scary, scaly monsters that chased people through the jungle, they were small, feathered dinosaurs that probably spent their time leaping between trees. I know it's a pretty different image, but that's the beauty of science. As we discover new things, we learn that our current understanding of the world is always evolving and changing. And thanks to science, we now know that velociraptors weren't just dinosaurs, they were actually dinosaurs with feathers. So maybe they weren't so scary after all. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.